Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180 with your host Clay Kerner, and I'm Marty Pay. I wanted to start out by thanking last week's guest, Gary Bernstein, the CIA commander on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. Great show. We've already talked to him about coming back, and when we do, he's going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East. And as you know, Clay, there's a lot going on in the Middle East.
There definitely is. And you know, the other thing I wanted to mention, that people can now catch the show on
KERI.
KERI on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock.
On 1410. So our repeat is Wednesday at 1 o'clock on 1410 KERI. Next week, we've got a very special guest. Live in studio, we're going to have our own congressman, the majority whip of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy.
And Kevin is the third highest ranking congressman.
Yes, he is. Yeah, actually, the third most powerful man in the House. Kevin's always great to talk to about what's happening in the nation's capital. And speaking of the nation's capital, the presidential sweepstakes is starting. And we may have a couple of big surprises as guests, but we can't announce anything yet. But we've got a few things in the mill that are going to be kind of exciting. So,
but I'm really excited about today's show because this is right up the alley of the business that I'm in.
Yes, it is, Clay. We're both insurance brokers, and this is a guest we've had the pleasure of having on before, and really a fun guest. She's the president of the Pacific Research Institute, the author of a fantastic book, The Truth About Obamacare, which Clay and I both read. Clay's read it at least a couple times. And Sally's a fellow native Canuck, Sally Pipes. Sally, welcome back to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Sally, I have to tell you, I was up in Okanagan Falls, which is east of Vancouver, a couple months ago to see some family. And it was absolutely gorgeous, but the temperature was minus 15, and I thought, you know, I know why I'm living in Southern California.
Yes, was it minus 15 Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Good question. Celsius. So it would have, no, actually it was Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, it was Fahrenheit. Yeah.
Wow, that is cold.
Yeah, it is really, really cold. And needless to say, I have a younger brother who lives up there who loves Obamacare, so he and I were debating Obamacare, and it's interesting, the older people that actually need the health care really don't like the Canadian health care, but the younger people seem to think it's okay, but I wonder why.
Because they don't use it.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't need it. They're, the young invincible, very rare that a young person, comes down with something catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. And, a couple months ago, the Newfoundland Premier, it's such a great healthcare system in Canada that he came down to the United States to have heart surgery. Yes,
Danny Williams, the Premier of Newfoundland, when he was diagnosed with needing a heart valve replacement, he couldn't get it in Newfoundland, Canada's most easterly province, and of course, he would be on a waiting list in Toronto or London, Ontario. So it was urgent, so he picked himself up and went to Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami, paid out of pocket, had the surgery done, non-invasive, came back to Newfoundland, and the Canadian media was just up in arms. How could a politician go to the United States and have something done immediately? And so Danny Williams fired back. It's my heart, it's my health, it's my choice. And that certainly quieted down the Canadian media. But that, the important thing is Canadians do have a choice. They have an escape valve. They can come to the United States and pay out of pocket for urgent things that they have to go on a waiting list in Canada for.
So what happens to that escape valve when we finally implement all of Obamacare, which has been declared unconstitutional?
Well, my hope is that, we have the constitutional challenges up, and I'm hoping that Judge Vincent of Florida, his case is being appealed by the Department of Justice to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm hoping that whatever way that goes, it'll go to the full panel and then ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court may take this case, as early as this fall, and they may come down with a decision in June of 2012, which would be very important because if it's ruled, the whole law is ruled unconstitutional, well then this is going to have a major impact on how can Obamacare survive and on the election, the presidential election of 2012. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot going on, but I think my whole thing today is that we need to repeal and replace Obamacare, but it's so important that the Republicans take the presidency in 2012 and both houses of Congress so that early in 2013 this legislation could be repealed and replaced with legislation that will bring about affordable, accessible, quality care for all Americans. Obamacare is not going to achieve universal coverage, and we already know it's not bending the cost curve down.
Well, currently we have the best health care in the world, and the cost of our health care as compared to what it compared to what it is now is changed drastically.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the president said, and he gave 58 speeches before the passage and signing by him on March 23rd, a year and 2 days ago. He said, my two goals are universal coverage and bending the cost curve down. Well, the Congressional Budget Office has said by 2019 the costs are not going to go down. The average premium for the average family is going to go up by $2,100, not down by $2,500, as the president promised. And 23 million Americans will still be uninsured. So, we're seeing costs go up already. We're seeing employers dropping the coverage that they provide for their employees. So the first anniversary has not proved, very good for the president. 62% of Americans are still in favor of repealing this legislation. They see it's going to result ultimately in higher taxes, higher deficits, and care being rationed, and maybe even taking us down the path to a single-payer Canadian-style Medicare for all system.
Oh, and that's scary. We're having a conversation with Sally Pipes, president of the Pacific Research Institute, on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.
Well, Sally, from everything I hear and everything I watch, it appears that a single payer is really the goal of the Democratic Party and this particular president. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. President Obama, before he became president, when he was senator from Illinois, he gave a number of speeches saying that if he were designing the healthcare system, it would be a single-payer system. So I think people like Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and the president all favor a single-payer system. And, in the original House bill, there was a public option, a government-run insurance plan that would compete against private insurers. It didn't make it into the final bill. But you have people like Lynn Woolsey from Marin County who has reintroduced an amendment which would bring back the public option. People like Bernie Sanders. There are a lot of Democrats, very liberal, that their goal is the single-payer Medicare for all. And the president is definitely, that's his secret, I think, hidden agenda.
Well, another thing I want you to touch on, and I'm sorry to keep jumping around, but waivers. It appears that the biggest union that supported this bill, the SEIU, has applied for and received a waiver that they don't have to have their members participate in this program, as have several cities. And New York, I believe, has even applied for a waiver at this time. What do you know about that?
Right. Well, in Obamacare, there is a provision called the medical loss ratio, the MLR. Now, most people don't talk about MLRs around the dinner table, but this has a very serious impact on insurance companies. Starting on January 1st, Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of HHS, introduced and signed the regulation that said that health insurance companies would have to pay out 80% of the premiums they collect on claims in the individual and small group market, and 85% on claims in the large group market. So the state of Maine just received a waiver saying that their insurance companies do not have to apply. There are only 3 insurance companies left in Maine anyway with this medical loss ratio. But the other thing of the controls on insurance companies that came into being on September 23rd, one of the things is the elimination by 2014 of annual limits or lifetime caps. So starting this year, an insurance company is going to have to pay out a minimum of $750,000 in claims. Well, companies like McDonald's and Starbucks and Burger King and Denny's, they have large workforces, a lot of them young people, and they provide these mini-med plans that are very inexpensive. But what they found was with the mini-med plans, they weren't going to be able to also, have their insurer pay out $750,000 in claims. So they applied for waivers. 1,040 waivers have already been granted to companies like McDonald's, also the states of Florida, Alaska, Texas have all applied for waivers as well. So, it's very interesting. These waivers are good for 1 year, and then ultimately in 2014, if this legislation has not been repealed, we will see the state-based exchanges go into being, and then these companies would have to get insurance for their employees through the state-based exchanges if they don't cover them under their current plan. So it's very interesting that Obama and Sebelius said, this bill and this legislation is about consumer choice. Well, how can it be consumer choice when all of these companies found that they couldn't comply with this regulation?
Yeah, good point. And Sally, when we come back for the break, let's talk about Starbucks and IHOP and their take on this. We'll be back in a minute with Sally Pipes on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.